Hello, I'm Stephanie, the East Asia Research Consultant based here in Shanghai. I spend much of my time talking with school leaders about a whole range of topics, including demand for pupil places in their cities and in their schools, prospects for international school growth, teacher recruitment, government legislation and regulation, facility plans, contracts and so on. Most recently, I've been in Seoul and on Jeju Island, and I've used the outcomes from the discussions with school leaders there to write the South Korea Market Intelligence Report. They told me that actually it's not a rapidly growing school international market in South Korea. Land is at a premium, and although there is a huge appetite amongst Korean families for international style of education, the enrollment of South Korean pupils is strictly controlled. I've also been talking with school leaders in Japan, and at the moment they are looking very carefully at the implications, the financial implications for them of moving their staff onto the Japanese National Health and Pension Scheme. And they're also paying careful attention to new government legislation that came out back in October, where the government is now putting much more money aside to fund free places in government and some private preschools for young children. So clearly international school leaders are looking very much at the impact that might have on their own international kindergartens. Of course, here in China, the big news is all about the coronavirus. Since the Chinese New Year holiday, private, public and international schools have remained closed. And as yet, there is no date on when they might reopen. Schools have moved their teaching from classroom learning to online teaching, and they are very carefully monitoring the situation. They're concerned about the impact that it might have on their student outcomes, as well as demand for places next year and maybe even teacher recruitment. Schools in Hong Kong are facing similar challenges. And again, back here in China and in Shanghai, Chinese private schools and public schools are waiting for news on the implementation of the new admission regulations for children that will be starting grade 1 and grade 6 in Chinese private and public schools from August or September 2020. In the meantime, I'll keep my ear to the ground.
So how is demand for international schools in the Middle East and North Africa at the moment? Well, I guess we should start by looking at the oil and gas market, which has, as many of you are aware, declined over the last few years, which has certainly impacted international schools, as many of the economies in the Middle East are certainly very reliant on the oil and gas industry. There are more international schools in the Gulf as well at the moment, and with the declining population of expatriates, this certainly makes a very tough market to operate in. There's currently a huge drive from a number of different Middle East countries to focus on the employment of local nationals above expatriates. And we're seeing this in countries like Bahrain with Bahrainisation and Saudi Arabia with Saudization, where a number of the employees within an organisation have to be local, which is of course impacting the expatriate population, but is allowing for a greater level of skill set within the local population and increasing the middle class wealth. With the growth in middle class wealth across the Middle East and North Africa, we're seeing a large number of local students attending international schools where parents are much more savvy to the benefits of an international education, with the likes of the English language skills that can be accessed, with the proven gateways to top tier higher education universities, and the various different opportunities from studying in a globally recognized curriculum. Therefore, many students who 5-6 years ago would have been attending the local system are now simply attending the international school systems in the Middle East.
The market for international schools in Southeast Asia has been growing, and it is actually very different by country, because if we look at in Malaysia, the international school boom has started way earlier. However, the similar boom that you would see that is currently ongoing is now in Vietnam. Vietnam has recently changed the law 2 years ago, where there is actually where local students can enroll up to 49.9%. So this have increased the need for international education. What is very interesting if we look at the current international education in Vietnam is there is a rise for bilingual schools, which is very similar if we also look at in Indonesia, where schools are more bilingual in nature, that are doing much more better, in contrary to say a more British form or a more international like education.
Hi, I'm Susan Crumrine. I've been working with ISC Research for several years, keeping my finger on the pulse for Europe and North America. At ISC, we know in the schools who to speak with, what to ask, how to gather the intelligence on the educational market, and we have boots on the ground globally. In Europe now, as we know, UK left the EU on January 31st, 2020, and they are now in an 11-month transitional phase. Still in Europe and in European cities such as Amsterdam and Frankfurt, possibly Paris, they're still wondering, what will we do? Which students will we be able to enroll? The schools are quite full in most of the cities, especially in Amsterdam, but they need to know, will there be one student from a family, 3 students from a family? We're looking at all the options. Also, we are looking at what is happening in Europe with the coronavirus. That we know in Italy, the schools are closed. In northern Italy, any students that have been there in a certain time period and have come back to schools are quarantined in their own home countries and cities. We're seeing their neighboring country, France, having also some issues with the coronavirus. But all in all, the European market is very stable, as it has been the past several years. And on to North America, we have a very strong international market for schools. We have many international schools, but they're mainly on the coastal regions, and there are some scattered here and there in other areas. For instance, in Charlotte, they are growing at an exponential rate because they are getting a lot of global businesses moving in. So we know that also with the coronavirus, that it is coming more to the bigger cities and arriving in the Seattle area where schools are closed. In certain areas, different schools are closing at different times. With our organization at AAIE, there is a matrix and a lot of support that can be anybody can use, any head of school, any leadership team member, to see the matrix, what to do, how to know what risk level, when to close, when not to close, and how to keep everyone as safe as possible. And we are very thankful that not as many schools are closed here that we thought would be at this time, but we're keeping a great and close watch on that. It's always a pleasure going into schools and speaking with heads of schools and the leadership team members, and we are very thankful for the information that we receive and what we can give back to them. Thank you.